For the past 4 or 5 months, we at Massive have been experimenting exhaustively with generative AI and trying to figure out how we can work it into our workflow and deliverables. Clearly, the technology is crazy powerful, but it's a different thing just to try to practically work it into your workflow and then bring a team and the clients along for the ride, and then do it in a way that not only aligns with our values as an agency, but also the values of our clients. So here are a few tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. Let's start with 4 unavoidable truths. The first is that this technology is not just a fad. There's a lot who I think maybe are waiting for this technology to become perfected so that you won't get 12 fingers or 3 ears in a prompt per se. But my argument would be that even in this imperfect state, there's utility and value in learning how to use the technology. So get comfortable with it. Even if it's not perfect, that stuff's gonna get ironed out relatively quickly. There's a common saying, pioneers take the arrows and settlers take the land, and that's an approach that a lot of business leaders take. It's that idea that if you adopt something early, it's too risky. Our argument would be that in this world where things are advancing so quickly, it's actually riskier to wait than it is to jump on this technology even in this imperfect state. So those that are waiting for things to become perfectly ironed out, sadly will be lapped by individuals who are rolling up their sleeves and teams who are already incorporating that technology even in its imperfect, sometimes impractical state. Inevitably, there are going to be kind of 2 camps in which leaders and organizations fall when they have this technology. And it really isn't anything new, but the first camp will do what most organizations will probably do, which is look at all the different steps in their value chain, the things that they have to do to deliver a product or service, and they'll say, generative AI will help me reduce the amount of effort, and now I can compete at a lower price and undercut. That is the quickest way to commoditization, and when people talk about AI replacing jobs, that is where you're gonna see a lot of that. The other route, arguably the better route, is to view generative AI as a bit of scaffolding that can provide you the relief enough that you can put your human efforts into where to differentiate from the competition and create more value. Maybe it's a new product offering, maybe you're gonna open up in a new market, or maybe you're gonna expand your service offering or do something entirely different that nobody else has thought of before. That is the opportunity. And so those with an impoverished mindset will find themselves in a quick race towards commoditization, and those that choose to differentiate are going to be the winners of this technology. The last unavoidable truth is that artificial intelligence is not a passive player. Inevitably, this innovation and the disruption will come knocking at your door of your business and force an examination of your business model. The quicker you can roll up your sleeves and play with the technology and see where its utility lies, the quicker you can experiment with ways to use it to develop new value and adjust your business model accordingly. But those who are adopting it quickly are going to have more time to turn the ship. Next, you're probably wondering how the hell to incorporate this technology into your team of designers, copywriters, and developers. So here are a few things that we found really helpful just to get your team up and running. The first is that you as a creative leader are going to have to roll up your sleeves and just dive into it. This isn't something that you can delegate, and it's definitely going to require a level of initiation from you first. So you're gonna have to dive into those YouTube videos just to wrap your mind around what the possibility is and just to see how expansive the opportunity is. At the end of the day, as we mentioned before, this is going to affect the business, and as a leader, it really is largely you or the visionary in the C-suite that's gonna be able to understand how all those insights and inputs have bigger business implications. The second is it is so critical and important that you are able to foster a culture of experimentation and collaboration and sharing. I think there's a real tendency for leaders when there's something new or potentially threatening on the horizon to put constraints and to almost suffocate it. That is the antithesis of innovation, and instead we have to do something which is almost entirely counterintuitive and instead provide more empowerment, more autonomy for just messy experimental play. That people can go home and play with this and then just report back and say what's working and what's not. In this situation, there is no bad learning. Everything goes into the experience hopper. Reversely, in contrast to what I just said, you are going to want to educate the team on some of the bigger consideration and risks and imperfections of this technology, at least in its current state. The first being whether things are factually accurate. There's going to be a tendency to think that this technology, and by this I really mean ChatGPT right now, is a magic bullet. You're going to want to double, triple, quadruple check, make sure any information that is being sourced is accurate. In that way, it isn't a shortcut and it still requires due diligence on the part of your team. Understandably, when you bring this up with your team, you're going to get a lot of concerned side-eye looks, and people, I think, are understandably going to wonder, am I just being asked to experiment with technology that's going to inevitably take my job? This is where that trust that you have and letting the team know how you intend to use this technology is really critical, and you can't fake it. People will sniff out that bullshit, so it's got to be authentic. But it's so important to just remind the team and let them know and show with your actions how this technology is going to be used as scaffolding so that we can point our human efforts in places that are going to be an additive, and it's not about replacing or taking away. It's about making us better. It's important to remind your team and make them aware of some of the ingrained biases in these tools. Obviously, they are trained on very large data sets, but they aren't perfect. And I think they're getting better, but in the meantime, we have to be really diligent that we as creatives aren't perpetuating biases. And sometimes they can be easy to overlook. And that means we have to be more thoughtful and mindful about how we approach creative. There's also a lot of questions and concerns around copywriting and around usage. This isn't a perfect science by any means. Obviously, the jury is still out on this, and there's a lot of regulation being proposed to tackle this, from watermarks and so on. One of the things that we found is to try to show a history of prompts. And so even when we're pitching a concept to a client, or when we're looking at a piece of work that was created, the evolution of that, almost like long form division, like how did you get from here to here, and being able to prove to clients that this was the original output, but then based on your audience, based on your competition, based on your brand tone and voice, based on the location, the subject matter, all of the research that we've done as an agency, this is how it translates to this creative output. So just because we're using the technology doesn't mean that A, there isn't value that we're putting into it, but B, we can be a lot more confident that we're not spinning up somebody else's work or ripping off an image somewhere else on Google. More practically, do a reverse image lookup. That's also useful too. The final is quality control. As a creative agency or as a marketing team, you probably have gotten pretty good at things like, hey, checking for consistency in title case, sentence case, spelling. You have a tone and voice. You have a writing manual. You're looking for different things when you're using AI, and you almost have to reframe the way that you think about quality assurance and just checking in general. Obviously, there's a whole new set of challenges that come from images and tools like Midjourney. So as you start to experiment with them, start to notice what these imperfections are. Again, they're going to get better, but in the short term, you're probably going to spend just as much time as being saved taking something in Photoshop and fixing it in post, or counting fingers and making sure there's a pupil and an eye. But that stuff is going to get missed in the short term. And if it's really important to your brand or the creative, you're going to want to make sure that you create processes and redundancies to check for those. So there you have it. A few tips and tricks that we found really helpful as a creative agency these last 4 months as we've been adopting this technology and trying to figure out how we can work it into our workflow. So hopefully our lessons, our experience, and these tips will help you as you incorporate generative AI into your creative team.